So the next chapter is the chapter number 6, that is a resource management. In the last class, we have finished with the chapter number 5. What are the various impacts that is available in the chapter number 5? That is, we have finished in chapter number 5 in the last class. Today I'm going to start with the new chapter, that is chapter number 6. So first of all, good morning everyone. So let's start the session. So this chapter is very important chapter in this module. That is the same module that we have studied, that is the quality systems in IT, but with the new chapter, that is chapter number 6, resource management. That is how to manage the resources. What are the various resources? We can say the tools that is available for the management of the quality management, that is used for the quality management, that is the resource management. So first of all, what are the various requirements that is used in the resource management, or what are the various requirements that is used for managing the quality system with the use of the resources? So these are the various resources that is used in the organization. For example, there may be a financial resources that is in the money terms that is required by the finance department. So there are multiple resources that is there are multiple requirements. There is a resource management. So what are the various resources that is required for the management? So first is there is a resource management, that is how to manage the resources. Which we can carry out data, that is a financial reporting, that is controlled by the finance department. That is controlled by the finance department. This is the financial resources that is carried out with this one. Then there is a purchase material, equipment and supplies, that is controlled by the purchasing department. Then measuring the equipment, that is done by the, we can say that is done by the calibration department. That is required for this one. So what are the resources required for the that is controlled by the purchasing department, that is purchase material, equipment and the supplies, that is controlled by the purchase department, that is used by the purchase department. Then there is a machining equipment, then there is a plant maintenance, that is controlled by the maintenance department. Staff development, that is maintained by the or controlled by the human resource or the personal development or department. This is one of the important, we can say the aspect that is used in this one, that is a human staff development. And building maintenance is controlled by the facilities management department. There is a facility management department that is controlled that controls the building maintenance, right? So these departments control the resources but do not manage them. So that means they are only controlling the resources, that is how they control the resources but do not manage them. They therefore only performs a few of the tasks that is necessary to manage the resources. That is how to manage the resources, what are the very effective way to manage the resources. Collectively, they control the human, physical, and the human financial of the organization. That means whatever the department that is used, that is used to control the human, physical, and the financial resources of the organization. And the resource process has a number of the distinct stages. Now, what are the various stages by which we can use the resource management process? There is a business management, there is a resource planning, resource acquisition, resource deployment. So there is a business plan, then there is identifying needs, then there is a product, services, personnel, then there is a resource deployment, then there is the order fulfillment that includes the product, service, and the personnel. There is a resource management, there is a serviceable product, services, and the competent personnel. So whatever the personnel, whatever the data that is required, that is used for the personnel identification. There is a resource management, there is a resource dispersal. So after maintaining the resource or after maintaining the resources, there is a resource dispersal. So what are the various scenarios that is used for the disposal? So that is the disposal of the current scenarios that is used in this one. So whatever the resources, it firstly goes to the planned, or it has to be planned, then acquired, deployed, maintained, and disposed of it. That means whatever the resources that is required, so there is first of all there is a planning, then there is acquisition, then there is a deployment, then there is a maintenance, then there is a disposal. So these are the few steps that is used for the business management. And whatever the resource that is used, it firstly has to be planned, then acquired, then deployed, then maintained, and eventually disposed of. and the detail of each process will differ depending on the type of resources being managed. So whatever the resources that is managed, that is one of the processes that depends on the type of the resources that is being managed. And the human resources are not disposed of, but their employment or the contract terminated. So every resource is disposed of, but the human development, that is, we can say the human employment, that is not disposed of, but that get terminated after the, we can say the after the winding up, they get terminated. And the resource disposal impacts the environment and other interested parties also. Only measuring devices needs the calibration, but other devices needs the verification. So only the measuring devices need the calibration, but other devices that is followed, that needs the verification. And they have to address the financial resources specifically, but clearly they are required to implement and maintain the management system. So whatever the management system, whatever the financial resources that is carried out, that is used to address the resource management, that is covered under the product realization. However, the location of the clauses, that may be a barrier to the imagination. So whatever the imagination, whatever the barrier that is used, that is required for the imagination. Now, this is a close alignment with the process model. There is a resource management process. There is a type of the resources. This is the human, physical, and the finance. So there are three types of resources that is required. Human includes the personnel. Physical includes the plants, equipment, building, material, utility, support. So these are the various phases that is used for this one. So first is the resource planning, then resource acquisition, then there is a resource deployment, then resource maintenance, and resource disposal. These are the few steps in the resource management. So first of all, there is a planning, then acquisition, then deployment, then maintenance, and disposal. Now, how to determine the resources? That is also the role of the organization to determine what are the various resources that is required for the quality management system. That is, what are the various resources that is required for the quality management system that is used in determining the. So the standard requires that the organization needs the resources. Organization requires the organization to maintain or to determine the resources that is needed to implement and maintain the quality management system. That is, what are the various resources that is required to maintain the organization? What are the various resources that is required to implement the quality management system that is used in this one, that improves the effectiveness and enhance the customer satisfaction by meeting the customer requirements. So whatever the customer requirement that is enhanced, that is required for meeting the customer requirements. So improve the effectiveness, enhance the customer satisfaction by meeting the customer requirement, that is determining the resources. And what does this mean? That is, what is the main requirement, or what is the meaning of determining the resources? So determination of resources means identifying the resource needs. So whatever the identifying, or however, or whatever the needs that is required, that is the determination of the resources. That means identifying the resources needs. And the resources that is needed to implement the management system include all physical and financial, all human, physical, and financial resources. So whatever the resources that is needed or that is used to implement the management system, that includes the physical, human, physical, and the financial resources that is needed by the organization for it to function. So whatever the organization, whatever the resources that is required for the human, physical, and the financial resources. And the resources that is needed to maintain the management system are those needed to maintain a level of the performance. So whatever the level of the performance that is required, that is used to maintain a level of the performance. Now, if you put a boundary, if you put a limit around the management system and perceive it only as a part of the overall management system, there will be resources that also serve the management system, and also those which serve other purposes. So there are multiple management system, or there are multiple resources which serves only the management system. There are other resources, or there are other one that manage the other resources also, that is manage the other than the management resources. Now, what business benefit is derived from doing so? So what is the main benefit of deriving the management system? Why it is necessary? That leads to the process approach principle. So there is a process approach principle that is required for maintaining the effect. That is the process approach principle. And without adequate resources, the management system will not function. So without adequate resources, the management system will not function. As addressed previously, the management system is more than a set of the documents. So whatever the set of the document that is required, so that is used for the management system, that is used for the dynamic system, that requires the human, physical, and the financial resources. Because that is the financial system, that is the human system, that is we can say the logical system, dynamic system, that requires the human, physical, and the financial resources for it to deliver the required result. So whatever the required result that is delivered, so that leads to the process approach principle. How it is implemented, that is a common feature of all the organization, that is a common feature and that will be used for the different title, determination and control of the resources that will use to meet the customer needs, that is a fundamental requirement. So whatever the fundamental requirement, whatever the fundamental resources that is required for the memory management, that is required for the resource requirement that are needed to set up and develop the organization. That means they are needed to set up the organization, that are needed to set up and develop the organization benefits that is able to execute the particular contract or sale. So that means whenever we are using the resource management, that is a common feature of all the organization that is required for different titles, determination and the control of the various resources or the control of the resources to meet the customer. So what is the main target for the what is the main target of the resource? That is to meet the customer needs or the fundamental requirements and the fundamental to the achievement of other requirements. However, before the managers can prepare the budgets, they need to know what requirement they will have to meet. So before the managers can prepare the budgets, or before the managers can do the task, so they must mentally prepare, that is how they meet the requirement, what are the various forecast levels that is they're used to meet the requirements, so what are the various targets to meet the requirements, what are the various corporate activities that is used to require for the corporate plans, sales forecast, new regulations, statutes, new development, new product development plans, marketing plans, production plans, etc., as well as the quality policy, objectives, process description, and the procedure. So whatever the quality policy, whatever the objective that is required, that is used for the process description and the procedure. And in specifying the resources need for meeting the product requirement that is required, there are other factors, or there are three factors that need to be defined. So there are three factors that need to be defined over here, that is the quantity, delivery, and the quality that is expressed by the question. So whatever the quality that is expressed by the questions that is required for this one, that is required for the quality management system, that is how many do you want, that is how many questions that you want, that is how many questions do you want for this one, when do you want them, and to what specification standard do they need to be. So what are the various specification, what are the various standard that they need to be. So these factors will cause or will affect the cost directly, and if not determined when establishing the budgets, you could have difficulty later when seeking the approval to the purchase. So whatever the purchases that is required, that is required for the purchase management. Hello. So although the resources are normally configured around the organization department, nor its process, so departmental resources budgets can divert attention away from the process objective. So whatever their process objective that diverts their attention from the process objective, and the more effective way to determine resources by its process. That means it's the most, or one of the most important effective way to determine the resources is by the process, not by the department. So whatever the resources, whatever the department that is occupied, that is used for getting the resources done, that is used for getting the resources occupied for dynamic resources. And a practical way of ensuring you that adequate resources is to assign codes to each category of work and divide them into two categories. So there are two categories by which the adequate resources will be occupied or will be assigned. There are two categories. One is the maintenance, one is the improvement. So there are two categories of this one, that is maintenance and the improvement, and include all the codes that is associated while maintaining or with maintaining the status quo under maintenance, and all the cost that is associated with the change under the improvement. That means there should be a proper maintenance, there should be a proper changes that is occupied for the associated sales, that is occupied for the associated cost. So you can then focus on reducing the maintenance cost for the same level of sales. So you can focus on how to reduce the cost for the same level of sales without geo-jarping or without jeopardizing the improvement. So without improving, how to reduce the cost. And it is often difficult to obtain the additional resources after the budget has been approved. And there are four types of changes that affect the resources. That is the unplanned loss of the capability. So if there is a staff leave or the staff die, there is the equipment obsolete or the failure, major breakdown, there is a man-made or the natural disaster like flood, earthquake, anything, that is the unplanned loss of the capability. So that also affects the resources. Second, increase or reduce in the turnover. For example, the employees are going down. That means the reduction in the turnover, the reduction in the sales, then change in the organization objective. So there is a policies that have been changed in the organization, so that is a change in the organization objectives. Then a change in the external standards, regulations, statutes, markets, customer satisfaction. That is whatever the changes that is reflected in the external standards, regulations, that is the same, policies, market, customer satisfaction, expectations, etc. So maintaining the resources is over. Now next is how to or when to or what are the various categories or what are the various ways by which we can provide the resources. So the standard requires the organization to provide the resources that is needed to implement and maintain the quality management system and continually improve its effectiveness and enhance the customer satisfaction by meeting the requirement. That is how to meet the requirements or how to meet the requirements of the customer. That is, the customer will be satisfied by providing the resources that is a part of the quality management system that is providing the. So whatever the resources that is required for maintaining the resources or providing the resources. So providing resources means acquiring and deploying the resources that have been identified as we needed. That means acquire the resources and then deploy means give the resources to the concerned department, to the concerned person that have been identifying as we needed. So if there is a resources that is needed, so supply that resources or supply the resources to the concerned department, to the concerned party. That is providing the resources means acquiring and deploying the resources that have been modified or that have been identified as being needed. The acquisition process should deliver the resources in the right quantity and the quality when they are needed. So whatever the acquisition procedure, whatever the resources that is required for the that is required for the resources that is used in this one. So providing resources means acquiring and deploying the resources that have been identifying as being needed. So whatever the resources that is needed, so provide that resources or supply that resources to the concerned departments. The acquisition process should deliver the resources in the right quantity and the quality when they are needed. That is the acquisition process that should deliver in the resources that should deliver in the right quantity and the quality when they are needed. And the deployment process should transport and prepare the resources for use. So whatever the resources, whatever the processes that is used for the deployment process, that should transport and prepare the resources for use. Therefore, if there is an identified need for the human resources that have been provided only when they are in a position or they are in a position ready to assume their duties. So whatever their duties, whatever the concerned department that is used to assume their duties, that is a deemed competent or ready to take up a position under the supervision. So whatever the supervision, whatever the qualities that is approved, that is used for the supervision. Likewise with the equipment, it has been provided only when it is installed. So when it is installed, it is provided with the access, provided with the data that is installed, commissioned and ready for the use. The maintenance process should maintain stock levels, equipment, people, facilities, etc. So the process should maintain or should contain or should maintain the stock level. So whatever the stock level, whatever the data that is required, whatever the equipment, whatever the people, facilities that is required, so that there is no shortage of the supply of the capable and the suitable physical and the human resources. So there is no shortage of the resources, there is no shortage of the capable resources that is required for the physical and the human resources. Now, what does this mean or why it is so necessary? This will respond to the process approach principle, that will respond to the process approach principle that is used for the plans that is to be implemented resources that has been provided, but the process of identifying resources can be relatively non-committal. So whatever the processes that is required, that is not required for the non-committal, it establishes a need, whereas the provision of the resources requires action on their acquisition. So whatever the action that is required, that is used for the acquisition, that depends on the circumstances that may lead for the human being that is provided but originally required. Now, how it is implemented? That is how it is implemented over here, that provide the resources that requires the implementation of the acquisition processes. And whatever the physical resources that will be initiated through the purchasing power, the human resources through the recruitment process, and the financial resources through the funding process. The purchasing process is dealt with further under purchasing in chapter number This is the resource numbers. This is the resource planning. There is a resource review. After the resource review, there is an external. That is, external parties will be required. That is external. Then there is a yes. Then there is a no. So there is a resource planning, there is a resource review. If it is external, it is yes or no. If it is yes, then place the press advert, send out the application form, and if it is no, then produce the internal vacancy. That means produce if there is a, or we can say the produce the internal vacancy, then complete the internal transfer application. So first is the resource planning, then resource review, then there is the external checking it out whether it is external or not. If it is yes, then place the press advert, then send out the application, screen the applicants, interview the applicant, select the candidate, external, yes, no, maybe, that is required for the personal deployment. That is used for the personal deployment that has been used in the resource planning. Now, next is the inventory that is not addressed in the ISO 9001, but clearly an inadequate or clearly an adequate supply of the material and the component that is necessary for the organization. So whatever the resources, whatever the material that is required for the components, that is required for the organization to produce the required product and deliver the required services. So whatever the required services, whatever the product and the quality that is maintained, that is used to deliver the required services. And to enable you to achieve the delivery requirements, you may need adequate stock of the parts and the material. That means you need the adequate stock of the plants and the material that is used to make the ordered product in the quantities required. So whatever the quantities that is required, that is used for the inventory management, that is used for the inventory data. And to enable to achieve the delivery requirements, you may need the adequate stock of the parts and the material. That means you may need the adequate stock of the parts and the material, that is the adequate need of the material that is required for the products in the quantities that is required, and in a typical commercial situation, predicting the demand for your product that is required. Now, competence of the persona, that means how the what is the competency, what is the, we can say, the competence competition among the various personas. So the standard requires a personal performing work affecting product quality to be competent on the basis of the appropriate decisions. So whatever the decisions, whatever the quality that is required, that is used for performing the work that is affecting the product quality, that is to be competent on the basis of the appropriate education, training, skills, and experience. So whatever the skills, whatever the experience, whatever the education, training, skills, and experience that is required for the competition, that is a competence of the persona that requires the personal performing work affecting product quality to be competent on the basis of the appropriate education, training, skills, and the experience. Now, what does this mean? So if a person has appropriate education, that means if he or she is well qualified, training and the skill will be required to perform a job, the person can be considered qualified. That means if the person is qualified, that means it has an appropriate education, training, and skill to perform a job, the person can be considered qualified. And if a person demonstrates the ability to achieve the desired result, the person can be considered competent. Qualified and competent are therefore not the same. Qualified personnel may not be able to deliver the desired product, desired result, while they have a knowledge and the skill, they may exhibit the inappropriate behavior. So whatever the behavior that is required, that is used for the inappropriate behaviors, and a competent person may not appropriately educated, trained, or processed what are perceived to the required results or required skills. Now, what is competence? That is the ability to demonstrate use of the knowledge, skills, and behavior to achieve the result that is required for the job. So whatever the data, whatever the knowledge, whatever the skill that is required, that is used to achieve the result that is required for the job. So competence, it is the ability to perform the whole work role, not just specific tasks, but the ability to meet the standards that apply in the particular job, not in a classroom or the examination, and the ability to perform in real working environment. So whatever the real working environment that is available, that is used for the real working environment with all the associated variations. So whatever the variation that is required with variations, pressures, relationship, and the conflicts. So competence is not a probability of success in the execution of one's job. Now, why it is necessary? Why there is a competition among the performance or personnel necessary? So this requirement respond to the leadership and involvement of the people principle. So whatever the people principle, whatever the involvement that is required, that respond to the leadership and involvement of the people principle. Traditionally, personnel have been selected on the basis of the certified evidence of the qualification. So whatever the qualification, whatever the evidence that is required, that is used for the qualification, training and the experience rather than the achievement of the result. So whatever the achievement, whatever the result that is carried out to the various examples. Now how it is implemented, that they occupy the jobs that carried out in these positions. Now the standard require the personnel to be competent. Why the personnel to be competent? Because this is a competitive market. Everyone must be competent. Everyone must be in a competition to carry out the task. The necessary competence to be determined. So whatever the necessary competence what is the necessary competence that is required, then actions to be taken to satisfy these needs. So whatever the action that is required to taken to satisfy these needs, then the evaluation of the effectiveness of the action taken. So whatever the effectiveness, whatever the data that is required, so evaluation of the effectiveness of the action taken. So whether the action will be taken effectively or not, that is evaluate or identify the effectiveness of the action taken. So the standard is therefore implying that organizations should employ the competence-based assessment technique that should be used. Previously, that is not clarified in the ISO 9004. So the current method of the selection may be on the basis of the past performance, but without performance that is required, the standards in the place and the sound basis for the measurement. This method is not capable of delivering competent to the workplace. Whatever the competent people that is required for the workplace, that is required for the competent data. So that is address in the competent place, that is address in the competence-based assessment programs. So the assessment for the certification that is required. So whatever the assessment that is required. So assessment for certification, performance appraisal interviews, identification of the training needs, skills audit, accreditation of the prior learning, selection and the recruitment, then evaluating the training. That is how to evaluate the training that is required for this one. That is training awareness and the competence, that is how to provide the training, how to aware among the various employees, and what are the various competence among the various employees. So determining the competence necessary. So whatever the competence that is necessary, that is able to determine the necessary document that is required for the personnel that performing the work affecting the product. So whatever the work that affects the product, whatever the criteria that affects the process, that is used for the determining the various resources that is used for determining or performing the work affecting the product and the services. And whatever the resources, whatever the individual competence that is concerned with the ability of a personnel, of a person to achieve a result, whereas the training is concerned with the acquisition of the skills. So whatever the skills, whatever the requirement that is required for the skills, that is required for the personnel data. Now, why it is necessary? Because it leads to the leadership and the involvement of the people. So whatever the leadership style, whatever the involvement of the people or involvement of the people principle, so that leads to the leadership and the involvement of the people principle. How it is implemented? To perform a job, that is a matter of determining the outcome that is required of the job, that is a performance standard to be achieved. So whatever the standard that is to be achieved, that is required for the job, that is required for the performance criteria, that is used as a standard that is to be achieved, the evidence required and the method of obtaining it. So whatever the method, whatever the data that is used for the evidence, that is explained over. Now, example, an operator might need the ability to understand and interpret the technical specification, whatever the technical specification, set up the equipment, operate the equipment, apply the variations. Right. Now, next topic that is required is providing for the training that I'm going to take within the next class. That is how to provide the training, or what are the various training guideline schedule that is used for this one. That is the next topic that I'm going to start with.